Japanese infantry never expected Winchester M12 trench guns to slam fire through their defenses. May 12, 1945. Okinawa Prefecture, Japanese Empire. Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto studied the intelligence report with narrowed eyes, then set it on the mahogany table with deliberate precision. His uniform was immaculate despite weeks of combat, buttons polished to mirror brightness. "Look at this," Yamamoto said, flicking the paper with his index finger. "The Americans are using shotguns in modern warfare." Major Kenji Ishida nodded, adjusting his spectacles. "Peasant weapons, they lack the discipline for proper military arms." Captain Hiroshi Nakamura, intelligence liaison from Southern Command, leaned forward with a frown. "Sir, the reports from Peleliu and Iwo Jima suggest these weapons are extraordinarily effective in close quarters. The M12 Winchester can fire 6 rounds in under 2 seconds with the slam-fire mechanism." But Yamamoto waved him off. "Captain, we have defeated the Chinese at Marco Polo Bridge with 8-1 casualties in our favor. We crushed the British at Singapore, taking 80,000 prisoners with a force 1/3 their size. At Bataan, 76,000 Americans and Filipinos surrendered to our 50,000. The mathematics are undeniable. Japanese infantry doctrine is superior." What Yamamoto didn't know, what none of them could have known as they reviewed intelligence reports in that command bunker on Okinawa, was that Winchester Model 12 trench guns would shred Japanese defensive positions within 72 hours. The numbers would become catastrophic. 15-1 casualty ratios in confined spaces. 500,000 Winchester shotguns produced during the war. 12,000 Japanese casualties directly attributable to close-quarters shotgun engagement in the Okinawa campaign alone. The dismissive confidence in that bunker would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 110,000 Japanese military deaths on Okinawa. At Nanjing, Japanese forces had achieved 20-1 kill ratios. At the Battle of Shanghai, superior Japanese combined arms tactics had overwhelmed numerically superior Chinese forces. In Malaya, Japanese infantry had moved through jungle terrain that British commanders deemed impassable, achieving tactical surprise that led to the fall of Singapore. "Our infantry training is superior," Yamamoto continued. "Each soldier spends 18 months in preparation. The Americans rush conscripts through 12 weeks of basic training. Their industrial capacity means nothing when soldiers cannot fight." The Japanese Type 99 rifle held 5 rounds and required manual cycling of the bolt action. Effective range, 500 meters. Rate of fire with trained infantry, 15-20 rounds per minute. The Type 100 submachine gun, Japan's answer to close-quarters combat, held 30 rounds and could fire 450 rounds per minute in theory, though actual combat rates rarely exceeded 100 rounds per minute due to overheating and jamming issues. Japanese production, 10,000 Type 100 submachine guns total during the entire war. Recent American failures reinforced this confidence. At Kasserine Pass in 1943, German forces had inflicted 6,000 casualties on inexperienced American troops. At Anzio, American and Allied forces had been pinned on the beachhead for 4 months. In the Huichin Forest, American divisions had suffered 33% casualties attempting to penetrate prepared German defenses. The Americans could build ships and aircraft, certainly, but ground combat required discipline and warrior spirit that factory workers could never match. Colonel Yamamoto had commanded infantry at Guadalcanal, where his regiment had held Henderson Field approaches for 6 weeks against superior American numbers. He had personally led bayonet charges that broke American positions on 3 occasions. His tactics manual on jungle warfare had been distributed to every regiment in the Southern Command. He had received personal commendation from General Hama for actions in the Philippines campaign. His combat record included 14 major engagements without a single tactical defeat at the company level. Captain Nakamura spread reconnaissance photographs on the table. "Sir, American Marines are specifically requesting these shotguns for tunnel and bunker clearing operations. Our defensive positions on Okinawa include 450 kilometers of underground tunnels. The M12 Winchester has a cylinder bore that spreads 9.33 caliber pellets in a 30-inch pattern at 15 meters. In confined spaces, this creates a kill zone that—" "Enough," Yamamoto interrupted. "Japanese soldiers do not fear death. We fight from prepared positions with interlocking fields of fire. Let them come with their sporting guns. Our defensive doctrine has been refined through 8 years of continental warfare. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Detroit, Michigan, March 1942. John Browning, Jr. inspected the Winchester Model 12 rolling off the modified production line. The New Haven, Connecticut facility produced 300 military specification shotguns daily. Every 8 minutes, another M12 with heat shield, bayonet lug, and ventilated barrel guard rolled off the line. In January 1941, America produced just 400 military shotguns monthly, mostly for military police and training purposes. By August 1942, production reached 8,000 monthly across 3 facilities. By March 1944, the Winchester factory alone was producing 9,000 monthly. This single facility was producing more than the entire Japanese small arms industry's allocation for specialized close-quarters weapons. Dorothy Richardson, previously a seamstress at a Detroit garment factory, now operated the barrel boring machine that produced 120 shotgun barrels every 8-hour shift. She operated a precision boring tool that held tolerances to 0.001 inches, essential for the cylinder bore that gave the M12 its devastating spread pattern. Her station produced more shotgun barrels in one shift than Japan's Kokura arsenal produced Type 100 submachine guns in a month. Each barrel underwent magnetic particle inspection, pressure testing, and proof firing with high-pressure loads. Richardson rejected any barrel showing the slightest imperfection. Japan's entire 1944 production of Type 100 submachine guns, 8,000 units. Richardson's single station's annual output, 36,000 barrels. James Washington, from Birmingham, Alabama, operated the receiver milling station that produced 45 completed receivers per shift. His single station's daily output exceeded the Nambu Arsenal's entire monthly production of specialized infantry weapons. The M12 receiver required 37 separate machining operations, each held to specifications that Japanese facilities couldn't match with worn tooling and scarce cutting oils. Washington's station rejected more receivers for minor imperfections in 1 week than Japan accepted for all Type 100 production in a month. His quality standards would have bankrupted Japanese military production. Robert Patterson, $1-a-year man from Remington Arms, managed the ammunition production coordination between Winchester and Western Cartridge Company. Western's 0 buckshot loads, 50 million rounds annually. Each 2 3/4-inch shell contained 9.33 caliber lead pellets, each weighing 54 grains. Total pellet weight per shell, 486 grains compared to 139 grains for a 7.7 Japanese rifle round. A single M12 magazine held 6 shells. Total projectile weight, 2,916 grains of lead hitting the target in under 2 seconds with slam fire technique. Japanese doctrine had no answer for this volume of fire in confined spaces. Americans discarded 12,000 pounds of shotgun ammunition daily due to minor cosmetic imperfections in the brass or hull crimping. Japan allocated 200 pounds of pistol and submachine gun ammunition monthly to an entire division. Workers at Western Cartridge inspected each shell under bright lights, rejecting any showing the slightest crimp irregularity or brass discoloration. These rejected shells, perfectly functional, exceeded monthly small arms ammunition production for Japan's entire industrial capacity for specialized close-quarters weapons. The waste from single shifts quality control rejections exceeded Nambu Arsenal's total monthly production of pistol and submachine gun ammunition. American quality inspectors rejected shells that would have been considered premium in Japanese service. Specifications required 1,325 feet per second muzzle velocity with less than 40 FPS variation. Japan's Type 100 submachine gun ammunition varied by up to 200 FPS due to powder inconsistencies. Workers threw away brass casings that Japan rationed by the gram. Each rejected casing could be reloaded 5 times under combat conditions. Americans discarded them after a single quality control failure. The brass scrap from Winchester's facility in 1 week exceeded Japan's monthly brass allocation for all small arms ammunition production. Scrap brass was melted and recast rather than reloaded, a luxury Japanese industry couldn't imagine. The cafeteria at Winchester's New Haven facility discarded more beef daily than Okinawa's defenders received monthly. Workers ate 16-ounce steaks. Japanese soldiers received 400 grams of rice when supplies permitted. The cafeteria threw away more than it served. Plate waste alone would have fed an entire Japanese battalion for a week. American industrial workers required maximum caloric intake for maximum productivity. Patterson's reports noted that well-fed workers produced 40% more output than workers on restricted diets. The mathematics of industrial warfare extended to the cafeteria. The aluminum used in rejected heat shields in one day at Winchester exceeded Japan's monthly aluminum allocation for all small arms production. Heat shields protected the shooter's hand from barrel heat during sustained fire. Each shield required 30 ounces of aluminum alloy. Americans rejected shields showing minor scratching or anodizing imperfections. These cosmetic rejects functioned perfectly but failed to meet military specifications demanding pristine finish. In Japanese service, soldiers wrapped barrels in cloth and hoped. Captain Nakamura appeared at Southern Command headquarters in Taipei with production figures that turned his stomach. "Sir, American shotgun production exceeds 100,000 units annually. Their industrial capacity in small arms alone surpasses our total military production including rifles, machine guns, and artillery." A single American factory, May 15, 1945. Shuri Line, Okinawa, 3:47 hours. Private First Class Sato Yashida was cleaning his rifle in the tunnel complex when he heard the distinctive boom of explosions, closer than artillery, moving systematically toward his position. He checked his Type 99 rifle, 5 rounds loaded, 40 more in pouches. The tunnel entrance was 20 meters away, a perfect defensive choke point where Japanese doctrine excelled. At 3:47 hours, American Marines appeared at the tunnel entrance, silhouetted against false dawn. At 03:47:15, Yashida raised his rifle. At 03:47:17, the lead Marine fired his Winchester M12. 9.33 caliber pellets spread in a 30-inch cone traveling at 1,325 feet per second. Elapsed time from engagement to Yashida's severe wounding, 0.02 seconds. He never fired a shot. At 03:47:20, a second Marine fired into the tunnel. The slam fire technique, achieved by holding the trigger and working the pump action, allowed 6 shots in 1.8 seconds. 54 lead pellets filled the tunnel space. Kill time for 3 Japanese soldiers in the tunnel, 1.8 seconds. The pellets ricocheted off tunnel walls, creating a lethal environment where taking cover was impossible. Japanese defensive doctrine assumed attackers would enter tunnels with rifles, allowing defenders to use superior position and marksmanship. Shotguns invalidated this doctrine completely. At 03:48:00, the Marines advanced into the tunnel complex. Each of 6 Marines carried an M12 loaded with 60 buckshot shells. Total ammunition, 36 shells. Total projectiles, 324 lead pellets that could be fired in under 15 seconds. The tunnel complex held 43 Japanese soldiers prepared for conventional tunnel combat. At 03:48:30, systematic engagement began. Marines advanced in pairs, one firing while the second reloaded. The M12's pump action allowed reloading while moving. At 03:49:15, first junction cleared. Japanese casualties, 11. American casualties, 1 minor shrapnel wound from a deflected pellet. Kill time per junction, 45 seconds. At 03:50:00, second tunnel branch engaged. Japanese soldiers attempted banzai charge in confined space. Marines fired continuously. The mathematics of close quarters combat were brutal. 9 pellets per shell times 6 shells times 3 Marines equals 162 projectiles filling a tunnel space 1.5 meters wide. Kill time for charging Japanese squad, 4 seconds. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 4 seconds. At 03:52:30, deepest tunnel sections reached. Japanese defenders tried to use prepared positions with interlocking fire lanes. In open terrain, this worked. In tunnels, the shotgun spread pattern covered the entire cross-section. At 03:53:15, final position overrun. Kill time, 45 seconds. Total engagement duration, 6 minutes 15 seconds. Japanese casualties, 43 killed or severely wounded. American casualties, 1 minor wound, treated with field dressing. Kill ratio, 43:0 for practical purposes. The ammunition expended in this 6-minute engagement exceeded Japanese allocation for an entire regiment's monthly small arms ammunition for close quarters weapons. American Marines fired 180 shotgun shells in 6 minutes. Japanese regimental allocation for Type 100 submachine-gun ammunition. 2,000 rounds monthly, equivalent to 200 shells of comparative projectile count. Yoshida, wounded but conscious, lay against the tunnel wall. He had trained for 18 months. He knew Bushido. He feared death not at all. None of it mattered against a weapon that filled the entire combat space with lead before he could cycle his bolt action once. Major Ishida reviewed the after-action reports from the Shuri Line in Colonel Yamamoto's command bunker. "Sir, overnight we lost 43 men in tunnel complex designated position 12 East. The Americans used shotguns exclusively. Our soldiers never achieved effective fire." Intelligence dismissed the reports as exaggerated by combat stress. Yamamoto reviewed the casualty figures with a frown. 43 casualties in 6 minutes is impossible without artillery or flamethrowers. The report states small arms only. The Americans are probably misreporting flamethrower kills to avoid Geneva Convention scrutiny. He set the report aside. Japanese intelligence doctrine assumed American moral weakness led to inflated casualty claims and misreporting of weapon types. Captain Nakamura reported to headquarters, "Sir, I have interrogated survivors from 12 separate tunnel engagements. The pattern is identical. Americans advance with shotguns. Our soldiers cannot achieve effective fire before being hit. The shotgun pellets spread in confined spaces creates a hit probability approaching 100%. We must revise tunnel defense doctrine immediately. We need different tactics, different positions. Different American production exceeded 500,000 Winchester shotguns during the war. Japanese production of Type 100 submachine guns, their closest equivalent for close-quarters combat, 10,000 total. A single American factory's monthly output exceeded Japan's total war production of specialized close-quarters weapons. The Winchester facility produced 9,000 M12 shotguns monthly in 1944. Japan's entire industrial capacity for submachine guns, 8,000 units in their best production year. One American factory exceeded one Japanese industrial sector. Western Cartridge Company produced 50 million rounds of zero buckshot annually. Japanese annual production of 8 Nambu pistol ammunition for all purposes, 15 million rounds. American shotgun ammunition production exceeded total Japanese pistol and submachine gun ammunition production. A single specialized ammunition factory exceeded an entire nation's industrial capacity for comparable weapon systems. The mathematics were becoming undeniable, but Japanese command structure prevented the information from reaching decision-makers. They tried concentrating fire on tunnel entrances before Americans could enter. The Americans used satchel charges first, then entered shooting. They attempted positioning defenders deeper in tunnels where range might reduce shotgun effectiveness. The Americans used ricochet fire, bouncing pellets off walls to hit defenders around corners. They tried using grenade traps at tunnel junctions. The Americans sent shotgun-armed scouts ahead who destroyed traps at safe distance with buckshot. They attempted building barriers inside tunnels. The Americans blasted barriers apart with repeated shotgun fire, the cumulative impact of 486 grains of lead per shot destroying sandbags and wooden beams. May 18, 1945. Shuri Castle approaches. 2:15 hours. Marines assaulted fortified positions using shotgun infantry team tactics perfected over 3 months of island fighting. At 0215, 00, suppressive rifle fire initiated. At 0215, 30 shotgun teams advanced under covering fire. At 0216, first bunker engaged. 3 Marines with M12s fired 18 shells in 5 seconds. Kill time for bunker garrison, 5 seconds. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 5 seconds. At 0217, second position engaged. Pattern repeated. Kill time, 6 seconds. The systematic clearance of Shuri Castle's approaches took 45 minutes. Japanese casualties, 287 killed or severely wounded in fortified positions. American casualties, 12 wounded, 2 killed. Kill ratio, 143:1. The Americans fired 1,200 shotgun shells in 45 minutes. This exceeded the ammunition expenditure for Japanese defensive positions across the entire Shuri Line for a week of fighting. One assault's ammunition expenditure exceeded a week's defensive allocation. At 0302, Colonel Yamamoto received reports of Shuri approaches falling. At 0315, he ordered his adjutant to gather all reports of shotgun encounters. At 0343, he studied casualty patterns with growing anger. "This is impossible," he said quietly. "Small arms cannot achieve these casualty ratios against prepared positions." But Captain Nakamura had compiled testimony from 40 survivors. "Sir, the pattern is undeniable. In confined spaces, the shotgun spread makes evasion impossible. Our soldiers are dying before they can return fire effectively. The Americans have weaponized industrial abundance. Each Marine carries 25 shells. Each shell contains 9 pellets. They can fire 225 projectiles per man before reloading from ammunition carriers who carry hundreds more shells. We cannot counter this with bolt-action rifles." Yamamoto studied the production figures Nakamura had assembled. American shotgun production, 500,000 units war total. Japanese Type 100 production, 10,000 units war total. Single American factory monthly production, 9,000 units. Entire Japanese submachine-gun industry annual production, 8,000 units maximum. The mathematics were unavoidable. Japan's entire industrial capacity for close-quarters weapons was being outproduced by one American factory by a ratio of more than 10:1. Private Sato Yoshida, wounded and recovering in a field hospital, provided testimony to Captain Nakamura. "I am not a coward, sir. I have fought at Saipan and Peleliu. I know combat. But this, the tunnel filled with lead before I could cycle my bolt. The Marine fired 6 times before I could fire once. They didn't advance carefully. They advanced quickly, firing continuously, reloading while moving. Our doctrine assumes attackers will be cautious in confined spaces. These attackers were aggressive because their weapons made aggression safe." At the Winchester facility, production continued to accelerate. Dorothy Richardson now trained 3 other women on barrel boring operations. 4 machines produced 480 barrels per shift. Daily barrel production from this single work section, 1,440 barrels, enough to build 240 complete shotguns if other components kept pace, which they did. Annual production from this single work section, 350,000 plus barrels. This section alone exceeded Japan's entire specialized close-quarters weapons industry. Americans discarded completed shotguns that showed minor finish imperfections. Military specifications required uniform bluing on all metal surfaces. A small scratch during assembly meant rejection. These scratched shotguns functioned perfectly but failed cosmetic inspection. Winchester workers rejected 3% of completed shotguns for cosmetic issues. That 3% rejection rate, 15,000 functional shotguns annually. Japan's total submachine gun production, 10,000 over 6 years. American cosmetic rejects exceeded Japanese total production. Workers threw away shotgun shells that showed slight crimp variations. The crimps held the pellets securely and functioned without issue, but didn't meet the cosmetic standard. Western Cartridge rejected 2% of production for aesthetic issues. That 2%, 1 million rounds annually. These rejected shells were destroyed or sold as scrap, never issued to troops. Japanese soldiers would have considered these rejects premium ammunition. American quality control standards exceeded Japanese production standards. The cafeteria waste continued. Workers now receive steak twice weekly, chicken 3 times, pork twice. Japanese soldiers on Okinawa received rice when available, often supplemented with grass and tree bark. American workers' plate waste from 1 week exceeded total food supplies for Okinawa's 100,000 defenders for 1 day. The mathematics of industrial warfare included cafeteria budgets. Oil waste from Winchester's machinery maintenance exceeded Japan's monthly lubricant allocation for all small arms facilities. Americans changed machine oil on fixed schedules regardless of condition. Japanese facilities stretched oil changes until machinery showed obvious wear. Winchester used 500 gallons of cutting oil weekly, changed completely even if only slightly discolored. Japan's monthly allocation for all arsenals, 400 gallons. One factory's maintenance budget exceeded a nation's industrial allocation. Steel scrap from rejected parts exceeded Japan's monthly steel allocation for all small arms production. Winchester rejected any part showing tool marks, minor dimensional variations, or surface imperfections. These rejects were melted down and recast. The scrap rate, 5% of raw material. That 5% scrap, 600 tons of steel annually from this one facility. Japan's annual steel allocation for Type 100 production, 400 tons total. One American factory's quality control scrap exceeded an entire nation's production allocation. Captain Nakamura continued pushing reports upward. American Marines are requesting additional shotguns specifically for Okinawa operations. They're requesting 15,000 units for this campaign alone. That's more than our entire war production of comparable weapons. We're not fighting an army. We're fighting an industrial system that treats weapons as disposable commodities. May 22, 1945. Tunnel Complex 7 South, Shuri Defense Line. 27 Japanese soldiers prepared for the American assault they knew was coming. They had positioned themselves in a tunnel complex with multiple firing positions, interlocking fields of fire, prepared fallback positions. This was fortress warfare at its finest, Japanese defensive doctrine perfected through years of combat. At 4:20 hours, Marines advanced on the position. The engagement lasted 7 minutes. At 0420:00, suppressive fire initiated. At 0420:45, shotgun teams advanced. At 0421:00, entrance engagement. Kill time 12 seconds. At 0422:00, first junction. Kill time 8 seconds. At 0423, 30-second junction. Kill time 11 seconds. At 0425:00, deep tunnels. Kill time 15 seconds. At 0427:00, final positions overrun. Elapsed time from entry to complete clearance 7 minutes. Japanese casualties 27 killed or severely wounded. American casualties 3 wounded, none serious. Kill ratio 9:1. The ammunition expended 240 shotgun shells in 7 minutes. This single 7-minute engagement exceeded Japanese monthly allocation of submachine-gun ammunition for an entire division. Americans fired more specialized ammunition in 7 minutes than Japanese doctrine allocated for division-level operations for 30 days. At 0437:00, Colonel Yamamoto arrived at the position. He walked through tunnels filled with dead soldiers. Each man had trained for 18 months. Each knew Bushido. Each had been prepared to die. But preparation was meaningless against industrial warfare. At 0502:00, he returned to headquarters. He said nothing to his staff. What was there to say? The mathematics had become undeniable. Major Ishida studied the casualty figures and production reports that Captain Nakamura continued to compile. We're losing 3 men for every shell they fire in tunnel combat. They're firing 30-40 shells per minute in sustained engagements. They're killing 100 men per hour in tunnel fighting. We cannot sustain this rate of attrition. We cannot counter this with training or fighting spirit. We need equivalent weapons, and we cannot produce them. But Japanese production capacity was already maximized. Kokura Arsenal operated 24 hours daily. Workers labored in 12-hour shifts. Machinery ran until it broke, then was repaired and restarted. Maximum sustainable production, 1,500 Type 100 submachine guns monthly. And submarine guns weren't shotguns. They didn't have the same devastating effect in confined spaces. The spread pattern was what mattered. Each shotgun shell spread into 9 projectiles. Submachine guns fired 1 projectile at a time, requiring aim. Shotguns eliminated the aiming requirement at close range. At Winchester, workers now operated in 3 8-hour shifts. Productivity per worker hour was 35% higher than in Japanese facilities due to superior nutrition, regular breaks, and better working conditions. American workers were more productive individually and had better machinery and unlimited materials. Japanese workers were exhausted, malnourished, and worked with worn tools and scarce materials. The productivity gap was widening. Private Yoshida was interviewed again by Captain Nakamura. "Sir, I must tell you, in my 18 months of training, we spent 6 weeks on bayonet drill, 8 weeks on marksmanship, 4 weeks on small unit tactics. But all of it assumed conventional engagement ranges. The tunnels are unconventional. The shotgun makes them more so. Our tactics don't work. Our weapons don't work. Our training doesn't apply. The Americans have found a specific technical solution to a specific tactical problem, and they have the industrial capacity to deploy that solution in overwhelming numbers." May 25, 1945. Near Shuri Castle ruins, 63 Japanese defenders occupied a reinforced bunker complex with 9 interconnected positions. This was defensive warfare perfected. Prepared positions, ammunition stockpiles, interlocking fire lanes, prepared fallback routes. At 3:10 hours, American forces initiated assault. Minute-by-minute breakdown. At 0310:00 artillery preparation. At 0325:00 artillery lifted. At 0326:00 Marine infantry advanced with shotgun teams forward. At 0328:00 first bunker engaged. 12 Marines fired 72 shotgun shells in 18 seconds. 9 defenders killed instantly. At 0329:00 second position engaged. Kill time 22 seconds. At 0331:00 third position. Kill time 19 seconds. At 0333:00 central bunker complex breached. Marines entered firing continuously. Kill time for interior garrison 34 seconds. At 0338:00 final positions cleared. Total engagement duration 12 minutes from infantry assault initiation. Enemy defenders killed or severely wounded 63. American losses 5 wounded, 1 seriously. Kill ratio 63:1. The ammunition expended 420 shotgun shells containing 3,780 individual projectiles fired in 12 minutes. The fuel consumed moving supplies to the position, the artillery preparation, the ammunition expenditure all exceeded Japanese allocation for similar operations by factors of 10 or more. At 0350:00, Colonel Yamamoto stood in the ruins of the bunker complex. His uniform was no longer immaculate. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. At 0412:00, he sat at a table in an undamaged section of bunker and wrote his final report to Southern Command. The Americans have weaponized their industrial capacity. Each engagement demonstrates not superior tactics or training, but superior productive capacity deployed with technical precision. We are not being outfought. We are being outproduced. This is not combat. This is systematic annihilation. At 0437:00, American artillery began preparatory fires for the next assault. At 0508:00, Yamamoto's position took a direct hit. Elapsed time from impact to death, instantaneous. The officer who had dismissed shotguns as peasant weapons died in a concrete bunker, killed by conventional artillery, but his command had been systematically destroyed by the industrial weapon he'd mocked. Captain Nakamura survived. He was wounded on May 27 but evacuated to field hospital. Private Yoshida survived, severely wounded but ambulatory. Major Ishida survived, surrendering on June 22 when organized resistance collapsed. All 3 would provide testimony about the systematic nature of industrial warfare. The Winchester facility continued production through war's end. Total M12 production exceeded 500,000 units. If Winchester had continued wartime production rates through 1946, they would have produced more shotguns in 1 year than Japan produced submachine guns in the entire war. 1 facility, 1 year, versus 1 nation, 6 years. The productive capacity gap was not a matter of degree, but of orders of magnitude. At the Shuri Line's final defensive positions, Japanese casualties exceeded 15,000 in 3 weeks of fighting. American shotgun teams were credited with 1,800 confirmed kills in tunnel and bunker combat. That's 1,800 Japanese soldiers killed specifically by shotgun fire in close quarters, representing 12% of total casualties in terrain that comprised perhaps 15% of total battlefield. The weapon system achieved its design purpose, making close quarters combat overwhelmingly one-sided. Americans discarded damaged shotguns rather than repair them in forward areas. A shotgun showing receiver damage or barrel obstruction was tagged for re-echelon evaluation. If repair required more than 30 minutes, the weapon was discarded. Replacement shotguns arrived within 48 hours. Japanese soldiers used rifles that were 50 years old, maintained with improvised parts, kept functioning through desperate field repairs. June 1945. Allied Interrogation Facility, Okinawa. Captain Hiroshi Nakamura sat across from American intelligence officers, his arm in a sling, his uniform filthy but his eyes clear. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. Your production of Winchester shotguns, 500,000 units, exceeded our production of Type 100 submachine guns by 50 to 1. A single American factory, Winchester's New Haven facility, produced more specialized close-quarters weapons monthly than our entire industrial capacity produced in a year. We brought 18th-century warfare to a conflict that required 20th-century industry. Private Sato Yashida, wounded but recovering, provided testimony that was unusually candid. "I saw the American Marine fire 6 times before I could cycle my bolt once. The tunnel filled with lead. There was nowhere to take cover because the pellets spread to fill the entire space. They didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized close-quarters combat itself. The shotgun isn't a better rifle. It's a different weapon system entirely, designed for a specific purpose, and deployed in overwhelming numbers because American industry treated it as just another production problem to solve." Additional testimonies from captured officers and soldiers revealed a common theme. "We brought swords to a gunfight, except worse. We brought bolt-action rifles to shotgun combat in confined spaces. Their excess capacity exceeded our maximum effort. They discarded more shotguns for cosmetic imperfections than we produced submachine guns in total. They could lose 10,000 shotguns and replace them in 5 weeks from a single factory. We would need a year to replace 1,000 submachine guns using our entire industrial capacity." "The mathematics were brutal," testified a surviving company commander. "Each American shell contained 9 pellets. Each Marine carried 25 shells. Each shell could be fired in 0.3 seconds using slam fire technique. One Marine had more firepower in confined spaces than an entire Japanese squad, and they had unlimited ammunition. They fired and fired and fired. We fired 5 shots and had to reload manually. They fired 30 shots and reloaded while moving." The technical gap wasn't just production numbers. It was weapon system design plus industrial capacity to deploy that design in decisive numbers. Production statistics stated by captured Japanese intelligence officers revealed how completely they'd been overwhelmed. American production of Winchester shotguns, 500,000 units across 5 years. Japanese production of Type 100 submachine guns, 10,000 units across 6 years. Single American factory monthly production in 1944, 9,000 units. Entire Japanese submachine gun industry's best year, 8,000 units. The production gap was 50-1 at the weapon system level, and worse when considering ammunition. American zero buckshot production, 50 million shells annually. Japanese 8 Nambu production for all pistols and submachine guns, 15 million rounds annually. 3-1 in raw numbers, but 6-1 in actual projectiles since each shell contained 9 pellets. The captured officers were professional soldiers, not stupid men. They understood that Japanese industry had been inadequate. What shocked them was the magnitude of the gap. "We knew Americans had more factories," one officer testified. "We believed our superior fighting spirit would compensate, but you cannot compensate for a 50-1 production gap with spirit. You cannot overcome unlimited ammunition with courage. You cannot counter weapon systems specifically designed for the tactical situation with general-purpose weapons, especially when the enemy can field those specialized weapons in unlimited numbers." Major Kenji Ishida, who had agreed with Yamamoto's dismissal of shotguns in May, provided the most detailed testimony. The weapon itself was not the decisive factor. The weapon plus unlimited ammunition plus tactical doctrine plus industrial capacity to replace losses instantly, this combination was decisive. You didn't just have better weapons. You had an integrated system where industrial capacity enabled tactical innovation which was supported by unlimited logistical capacity. We had rifles and fighting spirit. You had weapon systems and industrial economics. We were fighting 20th century warfare with 19th century economics. The interrogators noted that every captured officer mentioned production statistics without prompting. The Japanese military had understood their industrial inadequacy too late to change strategy. "We received accurate production figures in 1943, Nakamura testified. But our command structure couldn't accept the implications. Accepting that we were outproduced 50-1 meant accepting that the war was unwinnable. So we continued fighting, and our soldiers continued dying in tunnel complexes where your shotguns killed them before they could fire back." The end. What it meant, the Winchester Model 12 proved that democratic industrial capitalism could transform any tactical problem into a production problem, then solve that production problem with overwhelming capacity. Free workers in Connecticut and Michigan outproduced conscript laborers in Japanese arsenals by factors of 50-1. The workers were better fed, better rested, worked shorter hours, and produced more per hour because efficiency requires treating humans as valuable resources rather than expendable commodities. Democratic cooperation exceeded authoritarian command because workers who benefit from production are more productive than workers coerced into production. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under 500,000 shotguns and 50 million shells, weapons that could be produced, deployed, and expended without concern for replacement, because replacement was automatic and immediate. May 12, 1945, Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto had laughed at American shotguns as peasant weapons unworthy of modern soldiers. June 22, 1945, his entire command was destroyed. He was dead, and surviving officers testified that they'd been systematically annihilated by industrial capacity. Their mockery became history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 110,000 Japanese military deaths on Okinawa, many directly attributable to close-quarters weapon systems that Japanese doctrine had dismissed as irrelevant. The numbers tell a story that requires no embellishment. One American factory produced more close-quarters weapons monthly than an entire nation produced annually. Americans discarded more shotguns for cosmetic imperfections than Japan produced submachine guns total. Winchester workers' cafeteria waste exceeded food supplies for Okinawa's defenders. These aren't exaggerations. They're documented facts that reveal the chasm between industrial economies. Democratic nations could field specialized weapon systems in overwhelming numbers because their industrial capacity treated military production as one more problem to solve through mass production, quality control, and logistical abundance. The lesson remains: dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace, or underestimating free people's productive capacity because their values seem soft, invites catastrophic miscalculation. The Winchester Model 12 wasn't just a shotgun. It was a mathematical proof that industrial democracy could outproduce military authoritarianism in any category of warfare, including specialized weapon systems designed for specific tactical situations. Japanese soldiers were brave, disciplined, and expertly trained. But courage and discipline cannot overcome being shot before you can return fire, and training is irrelevant when the enemy's weapon system makes your tactics obsolete. The Americans won because they built more shotguns than Japan could comprehend, loaded them with more ammunition than Japanese logistics could imagine, and deployed them with tactical doctrine that their unlimited supply made possible. The mathematics were undeniable, and the mathematics proved that free people with factories will defeat enslaved people with spirit every time industrial capacity meets ideology in combat. That lesson cost 110,000 Japanese lives on one island. It remains valid